I don't often do this, but we're trying to get to 15,000 subscribers. So if you haven't already, if you play Dynasty, please make sure you subscribe and drop a like on this video before we talk about Demario Douglas as our first breakout candidate. We're trying to grow this Dynasty community and this Dynasty channel as much as we can. 15K is our goal before the start of the NFL season, so let's see if we can get there. We appreciate you subscribing. But let's go ahead and go to Demario Douglas. Demario Douglas is a guy that last year, he was the wide receiver 64, and a lot of people be like, okay, you're talking about the wide receiver 64. That's why he's a breakout candidate, right? He's a guy that when you're talking about targets, he had almost 80 targets last year in an offense that really wasn't doing hardly anything at all. He had 49 of those as receptions. He only had 500 yards. He didn't have any touchdowns at all. But everybody was talking about the potential talent that Demario Douglas out of Liberty could have coming into the NFL and the potential that he did show. And I think in flashes his rookie year, he did show some potential. And I think when you're looking forward to this year, playing with either Jacoby Brissett or Drake May, both are an improvement over last year. The offensive system is going to be an improvement over last year. He's got somebody playing beside him now. Jalen Polk and even Jahan Baker are competent receivers, and that's a huge upgrade from last year. He's got, Kendrick Bourne on one of the biggest contracts in the NFL for some reason next to him as well in that wide receiver room. So the team overall is going to be better. The offense overall is going to be better. And so with that, Demario Douglas is a guy that a lot of people, 23 years old, he's 5'8", 192 pounds, so a little bit on the smaller end. But he's even just like latest news in sleeper, Demario Douglas shines at spring practices. He was the best and most explosive playmaker. And a lot of that is like, are you actually going to fall for that stuff? Maybe not. But there is I think it's warranted to some extent that people are excited about Demario Douglas because of the player that we know he is, because of the talent we know he is, and because that situation in New England is not only better, but it's also wide open in terms of opportunity and in terms of his potential to be the wide receiver one there. A lot of people, we talked about this on the podcast, which, by the way, new YouTube channel for the podcast. If you want to listen on YouTube, also listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever the frick you want to listen, but it's called A Show About Fantasy Football because we talk about fantasy football. But we talked about this last week about Demario Douglas, and Ryan talked about him potentially being a breakout. But I think there's also a world where he is the wide receiver one in New England over Polk, over Baker, over Bourne because of the skill set that he brings to the table.
Yeah, from a production basis this year, absolutely. I completely agree. I think it's very possible that he can, and it's for one simple reason alone, and that one simple reason is he's not the rookie. He's been there longer than Jahan Baker and Jalen Polk. He has a year in his pocket. He has NFL experience, and he's not a 30-year-old coming off of a torn ACL. Kendrick Bourne. And he's not, at least not a bust yet like Tyquan Thornton was going in the second round. So, look, to me, I think it's very interesting what Demario Douglas could offer in this offense, especially with his skill set. Like we already said, he is a smaller guy, and he also, his yards per target, not super large, which means that he is going to be a pretty easy target for what you would assume is a pretty I don't want to say raw prospect in Drake May. I think he's very ready to play his rookie season, but he's going to have to iron some stuff out as a passer. He's not the most mature passer, I should say. And with his yards per target, what did he rank yards per target wise in the NFL last year? 70th, 7.2 yards per target. To me, he kind of screams like he's not a yak guy like Malachi Corley, but he's going to be the same sort of asset, right? Where you're going to run him in the slot, you're going to have him in those short to intermediate target opportunity ranges, and then he's going to do a lot more after the catch. I mean, he was 25th in the league after the catch, 336 yards after the catch. And with his limited opportunity as a rookie, only 78 targets, only 49 receptions, he managed to be 25th in the league in yards after the catch. That's really good. That's really impressive. So keep an eye on this guy. He's definitely worth a stash. I mean, not even a stash. He's more than a stash. Everybody's rostering him in Dynasty. If you're not an 8-team, start 7.
Right.
But with him, man, I think you have a really, really good chance at a guided dart throw hitting in Demario Douglas this year.
I mean, you're looking at where he's being valued in Dynasty as well. You got Curtis Samuel around him. You've got Jaleel McLaughlin. You got Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnson, Marvin Mims, Michael Wilson, who we'll talk about next. Jalen McMillan, obviously, we like him as well. Austin Eckler. You've got Gabe Davis down here. You've got Tyler Lockett, Gus Edwards, Wan'Dale Robinson. This is a very affordable piece. So if he does break out, even if he breaks out a little bit, you're talking about him going from like being drafted in the 12th round,
Small value win,
13th round to being drafted in the 8th round.
Yep.
That's a significant value win, actually. And so, like, it's probably worth sending one of those guys for him if you have one of those guys. Like, swap around some depth pieces maybe and go get Demario Douglas.
Yeah, and I know we're gonna have a ton of people that ask us, domain guys, why are you saying you like Demario Douglas when you've already said that you like Javon Baker and Jalen Polk is one of your favorite values in Dynasty right now? Because they're all cheap.
Bingo.
They're not all going, all three of them in the top 7 rounds like Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, and Nico Collins are. That's a tougher situation to navigate because all of them have significant value. And honestly, one of them still realistically is probably going to be the odd man out in terms of what you expect them to do from a production perspective. With these guys, it's like, take a shot on any of them. We're all for it. We would still bet on Jalen Polk being the guy long term because he is the 2nd round pick. He does have significant upside and showcased that at Washington in college. But I mean, when you're looking in the near future, Demario Douglas again has a pretty good shot at being that guy.
I think he does too. And I think the next guy on this list is interesting as well as Michael Wilson.
Yeah, Michael Wilson, kind of a similar situation, but less mouths to feed in that offense as a whole. Honestly, it's less of a crapshoot of like who's going to be productive and more of like we have very solidified assets in this offense. We have Kyler Murray as your passer and a dual threat quarterback who has rushing upside, but he also provides a lot of passing volume. He can throw the ball 35 times a game easy. And you have Trey McBride as your tight end that broke out last year as a second year. He's going into his 3rd year, going to be very productive. We are very confident in that. He's the dynasty tight end too, pretty much unquestioned at this point. Then you've got Marvin Harrison Jr., drafted top 5. We know what he's going to be. He's going to be the top option in that offense long-term for the Arizona Cardinals and be the next Larry Fitzgerald or better. Seriously, that's what we're expecting. That's what we're hopeful for. And to help the versatility of the passing game, they do have a very good run game as well with James Conner, a very productive, good running back who seems to get better with his age. It's kind of weird. Kind of freaks me out. It's kind of annoying. Yeah. But also, like, it makes him a really good value in Dynasty. Super cool, super awesome. And Trey Benson is the guy that is super cool, super awesome. They get him in the 3rd round. He's going to replace James Conner long-term, and he could be productive as early as this year as well. So you have a good running game, a good passing game, and that, to me, just results in a good all-around, well-rounded offense where you have seen the second receiving option in that offense be productive. And I'm not talking about the tight end. I'm saying the tight end plus the wide receiver 1 plus the wide receiver 2 with Kyler Murray has been productive in that offense. And Michael Wilson is absolutely, without a question, the second guy there.
Yeah.
You had your doubts with Rondale Moore potentially, but guess what? He's gone. They trade him away because he wasn't what they thought he could be in the 3rd round. Michael Wilson definitely showed some significant flashes last year, and look, he's got to stay healthy.
Yeah.
Like he missed, I think, 4 games last year due to some health concerns. And that was something that he struggled with at Stanford in college. And that's why he didn't come out earlier, because he was a very well-respected, highly regarded prospect. That's why he went in the 3rd round, and a lot of people in the Dynasty community didn't expect it, but scouts were onto that. Real-time NFL scouts, like not you, were onto him because they were professional NFL scouts. And with him...
We weren't onto him either, by the way. We were not.
Right. Franchise guy was, though.
Yeah, should have listened.
Yeah, so towards the end of the season, again, the last 2 games, they really decided to give him more and more opportunity. And he showed out 6 targets, respectively, in those last 2 games. One of them was against the Eagles. He had 4 receptions, 35 yards, and a touchdown, good for 15 points. And then no touchdowns the last game, 6 receptions for 95 yards and 15 points. Yeah. So... you've got a little opportunity there, I think, in an offense that isn't too overloaded yet, and he could definitely earn his spot to being that second option behind Marvin Harrison Jr.
And when you're talking about his price, like, I mean, he's going around the same area that Demario Douglas is going, so kind of the same guys. Again, swap around some depth pieces if you feel like it. I think one of the bigger questions for Michael Wilson that you didn't touch on is them signing Zay Jones. They're very similar players in how they might use them in that offense, and because of that, you do have to wonder if they are going to give the veteran some of the targets over Michael Wilson. I think they believe in Michael Wilson. I think they like Michael Wilson, but they did sign Zay Jones to a 1-year deal, and you're looking at what he was able to do even in 2022 with Jacksonville. He had 121 targets in 16 games. And then last year he had 64 targets in 9 games, so was on track for another 100+ targets. I don't think that's insignificant for Zay Jones. I think Zay Jones is somebody who is, in kind of the twilight of his career now, but could still be somebody that's productive enough to maybe take some targets away from Michael Wilson. It's basically going to be like which receiver separates themselves there.
He could, but Zay Jones is also at his best when he is an exclusive deep threat, in my opinion, and I think that's how they would intend to utilize him with Kyler Murray coming back fully healthy. So
maybe, but that's also, I mean, Michael Wilson's kind of a bigger body guy like that anyway. So I think you're going to have, because I think Dortch is the slot guy. So I think it's Marv. I think one of these guys is going to.
Michael Wilson is your intermediate guy that you can line up on the outside if you need to, because he can't be productive in that way. He's a very impressively solid route runner. Like that's why he was drafted. His skill set is his route running. He is pretty versatile. Yeah,
so it's going to depend. Like, I mean, Zay Jones the last 2 years has had 10 yards per catch each. So like he has been used in the intermediate game. So I think they're similar. Yeah. I think it's who's gonna take more targets in that offense. But I think it could easily be Michael Wilson, because I like the talent that's Michael Wilson.
You take a shot on the fresh legs.
I think so too. And again, it's a 1 year deal, so like maybe you can play for 2 years from that. So all right, let's go to Zay Flowers. This is a bigger name, but this is somebody we talked about a lot in terms of like what's he actually going to do with like maybe potentially increase production, because when you're looking at what he was able to do in his rookie year, he was actually fairly impressive. He had 108 targets. He caught 77 of those. Okay, so when you're talking about somebody like, let's say, for example, Garrett Wilson had more targets than that his rookie year, right? He had 147 targets, but caught 83 of them. He had 108 targets and caught 77 of them, he being Zay Flowers. So you're talking about the quality of targets and the amount of targets that were actual catchable, and the quarterback. I mean, it's always indicative of quarterback play almost, right? And how many targets are they actually catching? Yep. It's very good. And then so last year, when you're looking at like from a sharing the load standpoint on the receivers in the Baltimore Ravens offense, Rashad Bateman, he was all right, but he didn't really do anything. He played 16 games and he had 56 targets. Like that's not going to be anything that's going to eat into Zay Flowers' production. Now, a lot of people are going to say, okay, Mark Andrews played 10 games last year, had 61 targets. That's 6 targets per game. Okay, yes, sure. But there is a lot of potential for Zay Flowers, in our opinion, to increase and build on what he did last year even. For him to have that rookie year is not insignificant, because even 2 years ago, we would have been like, wow, there's a really good rookie year for a rookie wide receiver like that. And our expectations have been raised because we have so many NFL-ready wide receivers coming out of college now and kind of taking the NFL by storm as soon as they get in. But 11 yards per reception last year. In 5 receiving touchdowns. 13 points per game. That to me screams sustainability. It also screams floor. And so when you're talking about those two things combined, I'm usually looking for those receivers to build on that type of production. In an offense that was one of the better offenses in the league last year, I expect that offense to be one of the better offenses in the league again. And so because of that, Zay Flowers, I think there is a real world where he at minimum maintains his production, but most likely with the amount of variances there is in touchdowns and also targets, I think you see him get more targets, this dude's more productive by, I don't know, 30, 40 points even. I think he could easily end up being a mid-wide receiver 2 this year. And you're getting him fairly cheap with that in mind. He's still going like 5th round for the most part in dynasty drafts, but he's kind of equivalent to the Michael Pittman range, the Drake May range, the Travis Etienne range, maybe even going down. So maybe sometimes
same amount of targets as a rookie compared to guys like Nico, Ayuk, and Waddle going well ahead of him as well.
Waddle had that many targets. So, but Tank Dell, DJ Moore. I mean, so this suggests you're getting him at the end of the 4th, but I usually see him go in the 5th. Yeah. So I would categorize that more as a 5th round price for Zay Flowers. Not that he doesn't go in the 4th, but don't argue with us about freaking prices again. Okay, actually he's 55th on here.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
So yeah, that is 5th round. But anyways, Kyron Williams, Kyle Pitts, JJ McCarthy, George Pickens. I mean, a lot of these guys. Wow, Jonathan Brooks has been rising on Keep Trade Cut. That's interesting.
So slightly.
Yeah. Ever so slowly, but this is still fairly cheap for a guy that if he is a mid-wide receiver 2 next year, his value is probably going to be like 3-4 turn, I think.
Yeah.
So you're going to see him get around and a half boost. Yes. But again, I feel like it's a fairly low investment, because I do feel like if at the very minimum he's going to maintain his production. Yes. And because of that, I think he's going to maintain his value in Dynasty. But the reason he's a breakout candidate is because what he did was super sustainable, and it was his rookie year. If he takes the natural step forward, you usually see these wide receiver take. If you see him get an increase in production, I mean, you're talking about this guy breaking out and being an actual very productive fantasy wide receiver. This is what you want to see if you have him on your Dynasty team, because you're going to get a good value bump from that. And I think it's very possible for Zay Flowers this year.
Yes, it is for sure. And you can have questions long-term about what is his ultimate upside and all this stuff and that type of offense with Lamar Jackson. We can worry about that when we get to it. But right now we know that his value ceiling is still significantly higher than what it currently is, even with what his potential cap ceiling could eventually be. It doesn't matter right now. Right. We'll worry about that later. Bryce Young is another guy that we'll worry about his ceiling later, because right now his value upside is just much, much higher than where he's currently going at price. And it's why he's one of the big guys that we've been recommending people target in their team blueprints, especially rebuilds. And if you want one of those team blueprints, you can go over to flockfantasy.com/domain. You can use code domain. We recommend that you use code domain. You should use code domain because you get a 30% discount when you buy a team blueprint, but you don't have to use code domain. If you're already a member on the site using a different code, you can go and you can buy as many blueprints as you want from us at any time, at any point, at a discount. If you don't have a code at all and you're not on the site, you can still buy a blueprint. You can go to flockfantasy.com and you can go buy a team blueprint from us, and we will give you customizable team advice on your roster, give you suggestions and comments, players to target, players to sell. This entire thing that's right behind me, this big fat blueprint, that's what you're getting customized to you. That's what you're getting customized to you.
It's not that big when we send it to you, but the file size is that big.
The file size is big.
And
if you want to take that file and print it out and make it this big, you could, if you wanted to.
You could technically do that. You could put it on your wall. It's a pretty good decoration, as you can see.
Yeah. Bryce Young is a great decoration on your roster as well. And really, he's cheap enough where he can be your third option on your team at the quarterback position in a Superflex league. People hate the guy because he was disappointing last year in a Frank Reich offense.
Who isn't?
Right, like every single quarterback that's ever been under Frank Reich on the Colts. Not named Andrew Luck, because Andrew Luck
was Andrew Luck.
And apparently he's overrated. Whatever, dude. Bryce Young, we're not talking about Andrew Luck. I can't do
Don't get him started.
I can't do this. Look, we've talked about Bryce Young plenty this offseason, and we spent a lot of time talking about him earlier in the offseason, kind of have cooled off about him for a while and tried to leave him alone so that you don't get annoyed with how much we talked about him. But again, let's reinforce the fact that this is an entirely different situation where Dave Canales is the head coach, the wizard, the QB wizard,
the Dave Canales line, remember
who resurrected Geno Smith and resurrected Baker Mayfield, has a much better, in my opinion, prospect than Bryce Young than either of those guys.
Correct.
And is capable of being much more productive than, honestly, maybe I ever thought in this type of situation. For me, it's not just the head coaching, it's also the investment in the offense that they've done this entire offseason. It's the wide receiver position. It's the offensive line that they've bolstered. It's the fact that they decided to trade away every single defensive asset just so that they could get some offensive pieces for Bryce Young. Like, your opinion aside on how to build an NFL roster, this is how you build some upside for a quarterback in Dynasty Fantasy Football and in Fantasy Football.
It's perfect. Honestly. It's the quarterback. He's the perfect quarterback 3 in a Dynasty league.
Correct. He absolutely is. And look no further than Deontay Johnson. Like, I don't even have to mention Xavier Legette. If they didn't draft Xavier Legette, they didn't draft another receiver, whatever, he has Deontay Johnson. That's literally the wide receiver that you wanted for Bryce Young last year, and he didn't have it. You're talking about one of the top 10 best route runners in the NFL. You think I'm crazy for saying that? That is not a bold statement. He is one of the best route runners in the NFL. He gets open. It's why he gets his targets. And Bryce Young, oh my gosh, he's going to get the ball to him.
I think you will.
I'm super, super excited to see what he's able to do this season. Not just Bryce, but also all the other offensive assets in that offense, because they're finally going to have a passing game now that they have receivers, which is going to open up the run game as well for a guy like Jonathan Brooks.
Yep. Yeah, all right. My last guy here is going to be Jahan Dotson. This is a guy, when you're looking at what he's able to do in his first 2 years, 12 games, 61 targets in his first year. Okay. 17 games, 83 targets, and okay. 500 yards. Okay. I mean, it's just not like really the big difference between year 1 and year 2 for him from a production standpoint on a points per game perspective was the touchdowns. And so, because you saw him have some bigger plays, that was, I think it was Carson Wentz that was throwing him the ball his rookie year, right?
Think you're right.
Yeah, yes, I remember that.
You are correct.
That was the post Colts Carson Wentz. But I mean, what does Jahan Dotson really do well? I think he is a big play threat. I think he has really good hands. I think he's really good at tracking the ball. But outside of that, when you're looking at his efficiency metrics, when you're looking at his productivity metrics, when you're looking at his opportunity metrics, I mean, these are really bad. Now,
Yeah.
Why could Jahan Dotson break out? Because the situation for Jahan Dotson in the last couple of years
completely changed.
It sucked. I mean, it was bad. Ron Rivera, I can't stress this enough. Him and Frank Reich suck at coaching. And you're going to say, yeah, Ron Rivera took Cam Newton to a Super Bowl, blah, blah. No.
Different time.
Cam Newton took Ron Rivera to a Super Bowl. Trust me, I was a big Panthers fan, and it was Cam Newton. And no, look, like obviously Ron Rivera had his place and had his time in the NFL where he was a good coach.
In certain roles, they are good coaches. Like Frank Reich as an OC, in theory, was better than he was a head coach. Ron Rivera,
but even last year, like they kind of, he brought in Eric the Enemy. He came in and
yeah. Well, Ron Rivera, like the difference too is like Rivera literally just straight up doesn't coach, and he admits it too. He's like, yeah, I'm more of like a CEO type of coach, and I like to let the team kind of figure out what they're gonna do.
Yeah, how'd that work out?
Bad.
Well, and so that's kind of the saving. Like you're holding on to that for Jahan Dotson because if he didn't do anything this year, he's dead. He's dead. Like so, Jahan Dotson's price. He's pretty much equivalent to a late second Josh Downs. I don't like this. I mean, some of these guys, maybe he's not too far off from Calvin Ridley, not too far off from Tony Pollard either. Jermaine Burton is next to him. Jerry Jeudy. I mean,
I think you have just as good a shot
Khalil
with
Shakir.
Jerry Jeudy as you do Jahan Dotson. I think the breakout the breakout opportunity is there, like we already said with this situation. Cliff Kingsbury runs a Big 12 offense. What does that mean? A lot of passing, a lot of yardage.
Have 12 players in the
But
field.
again, if you're right, if you are going to take a shot on a receiving asset in that offense, outside of Terry, obviously, because you know exactly what Terry is, right? It's Ben Sinnott as 2 or it's Jahan Dotson as 2. Personally,
but it's Sinnott. It's so Sinnott.
I know. To me,
he is the Sinnott. I am the Sinnott.
I am a Sinnott as well. I would rather take a shot on Sinnott at a little bit of a cheaper price than Jahan Dotson and go that route, especially when I'm confident that a tight end can be productive regardless of what the wide receiver does in that offense. Playing with Jaden Daniels, who's already a rushing threat, is already going to be taking opportunity there. I think the moral of the story here is for us, like, we can love Jahan Dotson as a talent, or at least me. I loved Jahan Dotson coming out of college. I was obsessed with him. I thought he could go first round. He ended up going first round, which was a surprise to a lot of people. Goes to Washington, and I literally cried. Like, I still remember the day that he was drafted by the Washington, what were they at that point? The freaking football team. And I was like, dude, Jahan Dotson isn't going to get anything. He didn't get anything. He still ended up being worth a 23 first going into his second year because rookie wide receivers maintain their value going into their second year. And I was like, why would I ever invest in Jahan Dotson at that price? He's a sell. And I think this year is kind of no exception. I wouldn't say that he's a screaming hard sell, but like, where are you at with him?
Well, the guys around him I like better than him.
So I guess,
and I'm definitely,
he's a soft sell.
I definitely like the Senate. So maybe he won't break out. I don't know. He might just be not any good, which would make sense because you really liked him.
He's still in the breakout candidates video. We're just acknowledging.
Okay, sure. He could be a breakout candidate.
He could break out. It's like putting Rashad Bateman in the fantasy video.
Well, right? We're talking too long about Jahan Dotson. Go to Kendre Miller. We got to wrap up.
Yeah, Kendre Miller is going to be our last guy here, and this is one that we do both but believe in to an extent. Do we think that he's going to be a super productive, amazing running back for the New Orleans Saints for the foreseeable future and be their franchise running back? No. Actually, neither of us personally really liked him that much as a prospect. We don't really think his upside is that insane because we don't really know what his receiving upside is going to be. What he could be is like a diet Mark Ingram, though.
Nice.
For Alvin Kamara and for whatever other running back they end up bringing in, because I do think they like their running back committees. He does have an avenue to be productive even this year, because of the big point is Jamal Williams. They the Saints paid Jamal Williams, and it was a joke of a signing, and it's just classic Saints. Like, what are they doing? and because they take a running back third round after paying millions of dollars to Williams, and then he gets hurt and doesn't do anything. Shocker.
He's also not any good.
Gosh. It's so bad. Go with the opportunity alone. We've seen running backs be productive alongside Alvin Kamara that are actually like good and competent running backs, and Kendre Miller could be that this year because he could actually get the opportunity this year. He is, in my opinion, the second option there. And the honestly, the first option as a exclusive runner. Because Kamara
probably
is, your exclusive receiving running back. He gets carries as well, but he's not known to be a super efficient rusher. Kendre Miller could be that, especially in the red zone.
Yeah, it's the sooner that the Saints realize that Jamal Williams is pretty much a sunk cost, the better, I think. But those are some guys, again, that are going to potentially break out in Dynasty. You let us know who you have as a breakout candidate this year, and also let us know what you think of our breakout candidates. Do us a huge favor. Like I said, subscribe to Dynasty Domain if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. We're trying to build a consistent, a quality community where we can really discuss different viewpoints about Dynasty Fantasy Football. So we'd love for you to join us. Make sure you drop a like on this video as well. And make sure you go to flockfantasy.com/domain. You got a link in the description. You want to sign up for a membership. And also, you've got a link in the description if you want to buy a team blueprint, no matter who you are. We got both of those things in there. And look, there's a big team blueprint right there. It's big.
I know. And blue.
And print.
Yeah. And you've got a darker blue with the DVM over there.
I wonder what that's for.
Oh.
Bye.